Okay, Assalamu alaikum. I hope you're all well, and good evening or good afternoon, wherever you are. Let's see who we have with us. Oh, there's a couple of people here. Assalamu alaikum, Perhonen Tuka. Hope you're well. Assalamu Sora, good to see you. Excellent. I think it's just you two right now. Good. All right, show me two people watching. All right, so sorry for not being around the last few weeks. Just some changes at work, some issues at home. So just wasn't able to. Just been really busy. I've moved to a new location for work, and sort of the amount of work I've needed to do and style of work was a bit different. So I needed some time to adapt. Okay, so what have I got today? So if you've seen from the title, and if you looked at the description, which is going to be talking about dua and supplication and a word which we hardly ever use, which is nida, but that's it's brought up quite a bit in the Qur'an, and just the idea of God responding to prayers and that sort of thing. It's mainly because of request, to be honest. Somebody asked me, could you speak about these things? And I thought, okay, I have a few things to talk about, but not that much. But still, I thought, okay, let me at least respond to this request. Okay. Assalamu alaikum, Mina. All right, so let me pull up the presentation. I'm going to put it down like this. All right, so so like I mentioned, there's one of the words used in the Quran for when somebody is calling God with a request is nida, right? Nida. It's not always dua. Dua is actually very ambivalent. There's a lot of meanings in dua and how it's used in the Quran. Nida seems to be the most straightforward supplication, even though we don't use it. We talk about, making a dua to Allah. We never say making a nida, right? But that's how it is. So what's the difference? What's the difference between these two words? So generally, we always talk about dua as a supplication and prayer request to God. We never say nida, though that too is Qur'anically attested. And in fact, a lot of the times that comes up, nida, it's coupled with a response, right? So we'll see towards the end, a lot of the prophets, God describes them as calling. Nida, by the way, means mainly just call, right? They make a nida. Quran describes it as a nida. إذ نادى زكريا, when Zakaria called his Lord, and in the next verse is فاستجبنا له, so responded. So the nida seems to be coupled a lot with response, and I'm not sure if that's how significant that is. But dua is used in a number of ways, including invoking others, in the sense of invoking the law. How we've spoken about that before. When it comes to the idea of shirk, when it comes to dua and how it's linked with shirk, it's more this idea of invoking, right? It's not idea of calling always. So dua doesn't always mean to call. So those verses which say وَالَّذِينَ يَدْعُونَ مَعَ اللَّهِ إِلَهًا آخَرَ, and those who call, it's usually translated call other gods with Allah. It's really about invoking, right? You invoke them. You say that you defer to them, right? Just like you invoke the law, you're deferring the law. You're bringing forth the law. So there's the idea of invoke in dua that's been used in the Quran. And there's also dua of the messenger that shouldn't be taken like the dua to each other. So you have this famous verse. Sorry, the beginning of that is cut off, but it should be la taj'alu, do not make the dua of the messenger. La taj'alu du'a rasuli bainakum, among you. Okay, among you. Don't make the dua of the messenger among you. So between yourselves. What does that mean? means between yourselves when you invoke the messenger. It's not like invoking somebody else, some other leader, some other person, right? When you invoke the messenger, that has weight. Okay, it says لا تجعلوا دعاء رسول بينكم, among you. Do not make the call. Of course, the translation is the calling of your messenger. It's really the invoking of the messenger among yourselves, right? So even now that happens, right? If even with those people who accept narrations and hadiths, right? If one of the scholars or sheikhs says something and hadith goes against it, they will sometimes, they will accept what the sheikh or the scholar says more than hadith, right? Because the dua of the Rasul among them is not strong enough. So it says, لا تجعلوا دعاء الرسول بينكم كدعاء بعضكم بعضا, like the dua of some of you to others. And then the rest of the verse continues. You can clearly see that it's talking about the what the messenger says. When what he has said, and then somebody somewhere invokes what the messenger has said, that should carry weight. The rest of it says, قَدْ يَعْلَمُ اللَّهُ الَّذِينَ يَتَسَلُّونَ مِنْكُمْ لِوَاذًا. Right? God already knows those of you who slip away, basically try to get away out of his affair, try to get away out of his commands. فَلْيَحْذَرَ الَّذِينَ يُخَالِفُونَ عَنْ أَمْرِهِ. So let those beware who dissent from the Prophet's order. So the dua is connected to the Prophet's order here. Anyway, the rest of the verse, I don't want to get too much into. The point is the beginning part is clear. They were not talking about calling in that kind of way. It's more like invoking. Okay, and at other times, dua is mentioned in the Qur'an, and it's not a request or really, it's not really a request or invocation at all. So here, for example, there's this verse which talks about the people of paradise, where they say, دعواهم فيها سبحانك اللهم. Their call, their dua in it is, exalted are you, O Allah, subhanak Allahum. Okay, that's it. There's no request. وتحيتهم فيها سلام, and their greeting therein will be salam. And then it says again, وآخر دعواهم, and the last of their call will be alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. Right, that's not a dua, it's not a request for anything. Okay, آخر دعواهم and alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. Okay, so it's just to understand that it's a very, like I said, ambivalent term, but it is of course used also in the manner of supplication that can be responded to. So we have this famous verse, أَمَّنْ يُجِيبُ الْمُضْطَرَّ إِذَا دَعَاهُ. Or is he not better? Because that this is a verse in a context. So just be aware of that. So is he not best? Amman, or he who responds to the desperate one, al-muttar, the one who's in really dire need, right? Al-muttar, إِذَا دَعَاهُ, when he calls upon him, removes evil and makes you inheritors of the earth. وَيَكْشِفُ السُّوءَ وَيَجْعَلُكُمْ خُلَفَاءَ الْأَرْضِ أَإِلَهٌ مَعَ اللَّهِ. Are there any aliha ma'a Allah? Little do you have dhikr. But so here, the point is here, it's talking about yajib, responds to al-muttar إِذَا دَعَاهُ. Right, when the muttar, desperate one, makes a desperate call, and he responds and removes that, the source of evil, the source of what he is calling because of. Okay, and of course here, بَلْ إِيَّاهُ تَدْعُوهُ فَيَكْشِفُ مَا تَدْعُونَ. Rather, it is him whom you invoke or call, right? And he would remove that for which you invoked, right? فَيَكْشِفُ مَا تَدْعُونَ إِلَيْهِ إِنْ شَاءَ, if he willed, okay? وَتَنْسُونَ مَا تُشْرِكُونَ, and you forget what you ascribed as partners to him. Okay, so in this verse, of course, it could also be taken as invoke, but here it's more definitely leaning towards calling, right? Calling, that kind of calling. And this famous verse, وَلْيَسْأَلِكَ عِبَادِي عَنِّي فَإِنِّي قَرِيبٌ, and when my servant asks you, Muhammad, concerning me, indeed I am near. I respond to the invocation of the supplicant when he calls upon me. Okay, أُجِيبُ دَعْوَةَ الدَّاعِ إِذَا دَعَانِ. Okay, I respond to the da'wah, أُجِيبُ دَعْوَةَ الدَّاعِ, the da'wah of the da'i, the call of the one who calls, when he calls, right? And then the next part of it is interesting because فَلْيَسْتَجِيبُوا لِي, so let them respond to me. I'm going to respond to them. Let them respond to me. وَلْيُؤْمِنُوا بِي لَعَلَّهُمْ يَرْشُدُونَ. Okay, but of course, a lot of people probably probably the reason why somebody requested me to speak about this because people ask, okay, I call and they want something and they ask and they call and they beg and they don't get it, right? So they want to know, what is going on. God says He will respond, but I'm calling and I'm not getting a response. Of course, that doesn't apply to everybody, but a lot of people have that in their minds. And they have experienced that, right? So, of course, why does God respond to some people and not to others is, of course, something, I can't answer. I don't have the answers for that. And, but, I can give some pieces of advice or at least some things to keep in mind, which I've, it's more like personal from what I've seen around me and, my own personal experiences and journey and stuff like this. So first of all, you find some people that really, they get told it's mechanized. The idea of calling upon God and getting response is mechanized. Especially for those of the more Sufi background, right? Okay, do this a few times. Recite this prayer this many times. Repeat this many times, and God will respond to you. Then call and God will respond to you. Okay, God isn't a machine that if you input the right sequence or push the right buttons, you will get what you want. Okay, it doesn't work that way, right? Don't get this idea like I want something from God. What do I have to do to make God give it to me? Like as you would sort of like be involved with a computer program, right? I want to get a certain output from it. So what inputs do I need to do? Okay, that won't work. Okay, that will just break you. Okay, there are certain things that are decided. Okay, also, and no matter how much you beg, they just will never be changed. Okay, period, or until they run their course. So there are some things, natural things are just not going to change. Doesn't matter how much you beg God, to make the sun go back down when it's rising. It's not going to happen, right? It's not going to happen. So you need to also be aware of what you can and can't ask for. There are some things, things which are sort of like part of the natural law, part of the qadr, the real qadr, not predestination. The qadr in the Quran is about God's measuring out of things and deciding proportions in the world and how things will go, a lot to do with natural law. And God is not going to change that. God is not going to change that no matter how much you beg. And also some things for which the reasons why you are here. Among the reasons why you're here is to be tested. So if you're being put through a test, if something is happening and God wants to see how you will respond during that test, it's not going to be removed until you've shown what you're made of. Okay, whether for good or for ill. Okay, so that happens. Even in one of the verses in the Quran talks about the believers being shaken and put through trials حتى يقول الرسول والذين آمنوا معه متى نصر الله, until even the messenger and those with him would say, when is the help of God going to come, right? So all this time, of course, they've been asking for the help of God, but the point is that you have to go through these trials. You have to go through these trials. Another verse in the Quran, وَلَنَبْلُوَنَّكُمْ بِشَيْءٍ مِنَ الْجُوعِ وَالْخَوْفِ وَنَقْصٍ مِنَ الْأَمْوَالِ وَالْأَنفُسِ وَالثَّمَرَاتِ, and we will certainly try you, okay, of something of fear and hunger and loss of the fruits of your labor and wealth and lives. وَبَشِّرِ الصَّابِرِينَ, and give good tidings to those who have sabr. Right, but those things you're going to be tested with them, and it's not the first time you're being tested. You ask Allah, remove this test, and He removes it. No, He's putting you. You're going to be in that test, and God wants to see how you go through it. And it's also it's a big, complicated world with lots of people. Some things you ask for are perhaps coming up against others who are also asking for them. Right, like obvious example is a job. Right, you apply for a job and you're begging God, give me this job, give me this job. Okay, let's say that that you are doing that, and God is actually going to intervene in who gets this job, even though in the end, of course, it's the application is coming to somebody and he's looking through them and deciding if somebody's clearly better or has, somebody's recommended them or whatever. There could be some other reasons, but if they're going to be picking somebody because of certain reasons, they're going to pick that person, not you. But let's say, okay, everything's even, the person's doing it very fairly, and then maybe there could be some sort of nudging in one way or the other, a little bit of inspiration or something to this person to accept you and not this other person. But this other person, these other people, they could also be praying. They could also be having people praying for to get this job, right? But it's only one space. So what you're asking for might be coming up against somebody else asking for something different, right? And so that's another issue, right? So while you're sitting there saying, I asked, I begged God to give me this job, I didn't get it. The person is who got it is saying, I begged God to give me this job, and I made dua that God give me this job, and I got it. They say, Alhamdulillah, right? Just remember you're part of a big interconnected, big world, right? Other things, of course, are in your hands, like passing exams, right? You're not going to not study, not do anything, and just make dua that you pass your exams, and you will pass them. You will likely not if you don't study enough. Of course, I'm wary about trying to sort of like limit or speak on God's behalf and limit. Say this can't happen. This can happen. You get stories of people like that, right? Who for whatever reason, for example, they weren't able to study because they were engaged in something important. Looking after a parent, doing something like this, not just wasting their time, and they didn't get time to study, and they're asking God, please, making dua that they are able to pass exams, and in that the night before they revise only a few questions, and lo and behold, in the exam those exact same questions are what are in the exam, and they're able to pass it. So you get things like this happening. Okay, I don't want to, Inna Allah latif, right? God is subtle, right? And we hear this a lot. God works in mysterious ways, etc. So I don't want to say things like I'm limiting and things. But also another thing, again, I think this is also a mentality that happens where it happens to the people who get angry and upset that God didn't respond to them. Okay, so don't fall into this kind of thinking that God says to call on Him, that because of that He is at your beck and call. That in some way you flip the dynamic, like He is the servant and you are now the person who calls. You are the master. Okay, you need an attitude of true servitude. Okay, in dua, you need to have an attitude of real ibadah in it. And I think that's really is the key to the idea of if God is going to respond or not. Right? In the end, He responds to the servants, to those who call with an attitude of servitude. And I think that's part of this latter verse. So it says in وَقَالَ رَبُّكُمْ. So even the beginning, didn't say قَالَ Allah, it says وَقَالَ رَبُّكُمْ, and your Lord, right? He says أَدْعُونِي أَسْتَجِبْ لَكُمْ, right? And you have to be in that. He has to be the Rabb and you have to be the Abd, right? قال ربكم ادعوني أستجب لكم. And then the next part, half of the verse, إن الذين يستكبرون عن عبادتي, those who are arrogant with regards to or in worship of against my worship, my ibadah, سيدخلون جهنم داخرين, they will enter hell contemptible, says here. But the idea here is that God will respond to those who are in ibadah, right? So those who are like calling to God, but not from a place of real ibadah, real servitude. They're not the ones who God is going to respond to, right? God responds to the ibadah, right? To those who approach in ibadah, right? God is in a state of majesty. You can't that you can't have this hidden thing deep in yourself, like you're outwardly you're begging, you're being humble, but inwardly you're like if you don't get what you want, you're gonna become you're gonna become arrogant and disdainful, and say, forget this. Why am I begging? Why am I? No, if that is in the deepest, if God sees that, even if you don't see it in yourself, then maybe that's one of the reasons why God doesn't respond. So real abd stands at his master's door and waits however long it takes for a response, right? And maybe these are the people who God responds to. Maybe God responds to those people who they would call on God for 100 years without ever being um, um, angry or arrogant or disdainful. Maybe that's what God's waiting to see in the heart, that it really is like that, and those are the people that maybe God responds to. And so those people who would stand there and who would be then, if the response is no, the person doesn't turn away angry, right? A real abd, even if the response is no from the master, they would never turn away in anger or in arrogance or anything like that. Okay, so again, so perhaps that is the state one must be in. Maybe that is what God wants to see. Um, so and again, you may think you are there, but in reality, you are not. And so somebody making dua, he's sick, for example, making dua that God cures him. He's making dua for 1 year patiently and stuff like that. But after 3 years, 4 years, on the fifth year, he abandons making dua and says, I call to God. He doesn't answer, and that isn't the state, right? That isn't the state of somebody who's relapsed. That's again, this is almost like that test we're talking about. God wants to see what is really at the bottom there. Okay, what's really at the bottom? Are you an abd to him through and through, or not? Right. So I mean, take the example of Ayub. Right. Ayub was sick for how many years? Right. And in the end, he kept on. He called. He just called to Allah, and God responds to him there. And so that brings us on a bit to the idea of nida. Right. So again, the word nida is used. And the difference between nida and dua, when dua is talking about a call, it's not clear to me myself. But let's have a look at it. Like I said, oddly, it seems that nida, that is mentioned quite often with a response. Okay, so we have verses like this one. Most of them are in Surah Al-Anbiya as well. وَنُوحًا إِذْ نَادَى مِنْ قَبْلُ فَاسْتَجَبْنَا لَهُ. And Noah, when he called, again here the word is nida, so nada min qabl. So we responded to him. فَاسْتَجَبْنَا لَهُ. Right, we responded to him. And then we have this verse where Ayub إِذْ نَادَى, and Ayub when he called, رَبَّهُ أَنِّي مَسَّنِيَ الضُّرُّ وَأَنْتَ أَرْحَمُ الرَّاحِمِينَ. And the next verse, فَاسْتَجَبْنَا لَهُ. So we responded to him. And that happens again in Surah Al-Anbiya with Yunus and Zakaria. Both of them, there is God describes it, what they did is a nida, okay, and God answered, right? And also in Surah Maryam, Zakaria, إِذْ نَادَى رَبَّهُ نِدَاءً خَفِيًّا, when he called to his Lord with a light nida, like a bit quiet, right? And God, of course, responded to him. So is there, why is nida used in these verses? And is there something in that which can help us understand why God responded to them? It's a question. I'm just putting this forward as a question. In terms of, again, what is the difference between the two terms? They're both used in this one verse. They both come together. And it's not related to calling in terms of supplication. It's an example. It says, وَمَثَلُ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا كَمَثِلِ الَّذِي يَنْعِقُ بِمَا لَا يَسْمَعُ إِلَّا دُعَاءً وَنِدَاءً صُمٌّ بُكْمٌ عُمْيٌ فَهُمْ لَا يَعْقِلُونَ. The example of those of الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا is like the example of one who is calling and he's making dua and nida to that which does not understand. Sorry, he's like one who is calling to those, or one who is trying to speak to those who do not hear anything but a call and a nida. The translation is not very good here, to be honest, but I don't think I'm doing better job of explaining it right now. Let me read the translation itself. The example of those who disbelieve is like that of one who shouts at what hears nothing but calls and cries, basically like cat on sheep. Basically, what is the example of it? It's an example basically of a shepherd, right? So a shepherd, he can shout and scream and say whatever he wants to the flock. They don't understand. They won't hear any of that, meaning they won't understand any of that. All they understand is nida and dua, right? All they can hear, and whatever you say to them is like, if a shepherd gets out and shouts at his sheep, the sheep think that he's calling him back. That he's calling them back, right? So they might come back to him, or he's trying to push them away. So basically, they won't hear except a call to come, or a nida, right? That's what this verse is giving, that kind of example of the shepherd. Here it says, in the translation, it says, what hears nothing but calls and cries, whereas it's more like بما لا يسمع إلا, which hears nothing but calls and cries. Yeah, so it's like talking to deaf and dumb cattle. Yeah, admonishing them, saying things. Okay, they're not going to understand, or they will understand just shouts and calls. All they hear is shouts and calls. But again, so what is the difference between these two terms in this verse, for example? Why are they both used? Okay, why not just one? بما لا يسمع إلا دعاء, or بما لا يسمع إلا نداء. Why are both used? Because of course these are different terms. Even if they have some overlap, they are different in some way. So understanding what exactly might help in this whole trying to investigate the idea of God responding and what that means. Dua would probably be closer to mean a call to sort of like come here in this verse, right? Dua, because a dua is like a da'wah, a call to somebody to come, to approach. Whereas a nida is just calling out, I'd say. Anyway, that's all I have in this presentation. Let's see how we're doing in the comments. Okay. Assalamu alaikum, community of God. He has a very good video on his channel, by the way. Let me see what verse you're putting here. 2118. Which verse is that? Okay. وقال الذين لا يعلمون لولا يكلمنا الله أو تأتينا آية كذلك قال الذين من قبل مثل قولهم تشابهت قلوبهم قد بينا الآيات لقوم يوقنون. So that verse in Surah Al-Baqarah, it's not as connected to the topic because I suppose just dua is not being used about that. It's talking about those who say, why doesn't God speak to us? Why doesn't God speak to us? We have here Muhammad Salam. I was reading an article of Skoyan, yes, and I can't say his first name, Frith Joff Skoyan or something. And he was writing about spiritual virtues. What are the spiritual virtues according to the Qur'an? Is the same as the goals that Maliki mentioned? Yes, I would say definitely. So the goals, in terms of the Qur'an, you have there are 16 Quranic goals. So what Hassan Malik calls al-ghayat, the ghayat of the Quran, what the Quran says is pushing towards the virtues. The middle one is sort of taqwa. Taqwa leads a lot of the lower goals lead towards taqwa, and then taqwa leads to the higher goal. The highest goal in terms of the human being from their side alone is shukr, which is to actually use it's gratitude, but real gratitude is to use what you've been given as it's supposed to be used. Okay, gratitude towards God That's real gratitude towards God, right? To use um, what you've been given um, in the best way, because God doesn't need anything back in terms of gratitude. What He wants is that what He's given you is used properly. That's shukr. Another way, if you talk about the virtues, I mean, I did um, the video which I like most on my channel, from which is completely mine, is the video on those whom God loves and doesn't love. So and I put up a list of those on my Reddit, and you can see them in the video, where all of the verses where God says He loves a certain quality and He doesn't love another quality. So those qualities that He says He loves, of course, those are the spiritual virtues. And these are spiritual virtues. More than that, right? You just take possession of one of those virtues of the things which God says He loves, and make sure you're not in any of the categories of those whom He says He doesn't love, and you're definitely saved. I mean, that's just one way to go about it. So that's what I would say. Those, so among those are, and it's good to learn them, because in doing that investigation, one thing I saw, and again, I don't think anybody, I haven't seen anybody who pointed that out before me, is that God never says in the Quran even once that He loves the believers, that He loves al-mu'minun. Assalamu alaikum, Muhammad. I'll bring you on in a second. Like in the Quran, God never says that He loves al-mu'minun. Okay, the thing that He loves the most are al-muhsineen. That's mentioned the most in the Quran. Um, and there's some other things which show up there. For example, that He says that He loves al-muttaqeen 3 times, and He doesn't love al-mu'tadeen 3 times. Again, showing that i'tida and taqwa are opposites, right? So yeah, I'd look at that. But yes, from your question here, yes, those high goals of the Quran are definitely part of the spiritual virtues that is mentioned, and they're known humanly anyway, right? God loves the just, God loves the muttaqeen, He loves the muhsineen, He loves those who are pure, right? He doesn't like the treacherous. Treachery comes up a lot, by the way, 3 times. Um, either with some another quality or by itself. Inna Allah la yuhibbul kha'inin, that comes up by itself, to be treacherous by itself. But then it comes up in the dual form of other things, like woman kind of khawan and athima, for example. Right, that's treachery. Khawana is another form of treachery. Okay, let me bring on Assalamu alaikum, Muhammad. Bring you on.
Wa alaikum salam, brother. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. How are you?
Alhamdulillah. How are you, brother?
Very good. Yourself? All
Uh,
well?
yeah, brother. I just wanted to add, like, some people that do make dua, they supplicate to God, but they don't look for the answer, because sometimes the answer is not going to come with, like, everything just working out. Sometimes your answer is in ways that you like. There's a verse where God says that He guides people in their belief. It's like
Mm,
the more you attribute to God, uh, and the more that you know that things are coming from God, and the more that God guides you in what you're believing in, if that makes sense. Like, obviously, you can get an idea, and if it sounds like fahsha or munkar, like an obscenity and immorality, you automatically assume that that thought is from the devil, and you ignore it and you move on. But then
mm,
sometimes you do get an idea which is coming from a verse of the Quran,
mm,
and I can give you an example. Like, one time I was in a situation where, well, I was locked up pretty much, and the people that were with me, they were the ones feeding me because did not have food. And one of the individuals, they were all like Sunnis. So one of the individuals told me that the way he makes money is pretty much printing religious text, and he's selling it for profit. So I remember just the verse quickly came into my head, like, woe to those who like, write the book in their hands and say it's from God, or those who make money from the word of God. And I remember saying to myself, like, you know what? Like, today it's His day for feeding us. I don't want to eat His food just in case. I don't want to, like, have God get upset at me. But then it was just an idea, right? And I started saying, well, it's kind of rude if I don't eat His food. And what am I gonna do? Am I gonna sit in a corner and not eat? So I started, like, battling with this thought. So, I made a quick supplication to God. I was like, God, if this is the truth, like, if I shouldn't be eating from His food, if you have something against this person, please show me. And I kid you not, like, I had a spoon where we used to eat. And I had my own personal spoon, and on it, it sat for like almost 12 hours, 13 hours. A small mosquito just sitting on the food. And people associate mosquitoes to something dirty, and it was just sitting on the spoon. And in my head, the first verse that came was like, God can give you an example of a mosquito or what's above it, right? And to me, that
Yeah.
was the truth from God. Do not use the spoon. Like, the spoon is dirty, the food is dirty. And as soon as everyone ate, and the next day came, and some other person's food came, and I kept checking on the spoon every like 20 minutes, 30 minutes, or an hour. The mosquito was still there. I thought the mosquito died on the spoon because it literally like spent like 10 hours on it. But the next
Mm.
day, in the morning when more food came from someone else, the mosquito was no longer there. So it's like God guides you in really what you're believing in. It's like
Mm.
truthfully. It's like as long as you attribute it from God and is not delusions, and God can answer your dua in so many different ways.
Yeah. Yeah, no, definitely I agree with that because, like, I mean, that's what I wanted to mention when I was sort of like, I spoke a bit on a tangent on which point was it? Uh, this point, I think it was that, interesting about that. Yeah, it's just yeah, I did. When I was saying that, I was saying I don't want to be um, um, sort of reducing how God, um, if God responds or doesn't respond, and how He doesn't, or how He does or doesn't. Again, it's God is subtle, as they say, right? That God works in mysterious ways, so you see that, and so yes, definitely that sometimes people are not looking, um, they don't see the answers which are given to them. Definitely, that's true.
Brother, the real reason why I came up here as well, I just wanted to say I can't wait to meet you in heaven, you and your parents and your seed and everybody that got involved in your life, brother. I really feel like you're one of the like more like courteous hearts and loving hearts in the world, and I wish there was more people like you. And inshallah, Allah yaj'alak imaman al-muttaqeen. Peace, brother.
Jazakallah khair. Thank you so much for that. God bless you as well. Barakallah feek. All right, that was nice. MashaAllah. All right, okay. So I'm going to have anybody else on. There's nobody else on backstage, by the way. So as usual, if nobody's going to come up in next 5 or so minutes, I will end the stream. But yes, I think that brother, I'm pretty sure he was Muhammad from Community of God. I'm sure of that. Very nice. He has a very nice video, which I really liked. I shared it on Reddit. It's a very nice video on his just giving just general, very good advice on how people should just behave towards each other in terms of the Quranic community and following narrations and hadiths and these kind of stuff. It's very good. Okay, next week. I remember I had mentioned last week or the week before that there was somebody I wanted to bring on. I'd actually reached out to this. I think she was a college. Her name was Emma, from the U.S. college, studying in university, and she had made a post about she was reading through the Quran. She's non-Muslim reading through the Quran, and when she read Fatiha, right, and then started doing on al-Baqarah, she mentioned a nice epiphany, which was that that the Fatiha is almost like how it is in some of the epic poems of ancient Greece, where the person writing the poem would sort of like make a prayer. The divine muse, which is like the divine inspiration, speaks through them, and then the rest of the poem would be like in the voice of the. I think that's how she mentioned it, in the voice of the divine muse. She ultimately, I'll explain in a minute, but she removed that post, and um, she just deleted her Reddit, so I couldn't get in contact with her. But I was like saying, okay, could you explain? Would you be willing to come on to the channel and explain that idea more fully? And she was saying, yeah, she would love to, but maybe it took me a long time to get back to her. I was busy. And when I got back to her a couple of, I think it was 2 weeks ago, or 3 weeks ago, I sent her a message. I asked her, would you, because I sent her a message before one of the weekends and said, would you like to come on this weekend? And so I waited for a response. Next time I checked on Reddit and on the chats and the messages, I found that she deleted her profile, her messages, and the website as well, that where she had posted her impressions of the Quran, her reading for the Quran, like she was keeping like a reading journal. That was gone as well. So unfortunately, she's not going to be able to join us. Unfortunately for that. But anyway, that's how it is. Other than that, I haven't been keeping up on what's going on online, either social media or on YouTube. It's very interesting though. Somebody sent me a link to a video by this channel, which I had seen a while ago, which was a very small channel, and it had gone increased a lot. It was one of those, because it was one of those channels where it's a Christian channel, speaking about Islam and stuff. So when I checked it a long time ago, it was like wasn't very polemic. Okay, it was very sort of like balanced. I thought, because I would like to have some discussions with some Christians and Jews, not in terms, not to debate anything or those kind of things, but just to discuss certain things. So I asked a few people if they know any decent channels. So this was one of the recommendations that came up. But checking it recently, somebody sent me another link from them. It seems to become like another one of those anti-Islam channels. Unfortunately, yeah, they become. It's very polarized. You can't find many channels of people who are just going to be, who would like to just have a balanced view, or just talk. But we'll see. Maybe I'll find somebody who I can speak with. All right. Checking anything. Had a question regarding the presence of Shaitan. All right. Okay. Yes. Community of God. Yes. What's the question, Fahir? If you can type it up, then we'll have a look. Otherwise, I think we'll end the stream now. I've still got a bit of work to do. Oh, here it is. Is Shaitan omnipresent? No, he's not omnipresent, right? So Quran talks about Shaitan as, Yarahu huwa wa qabiluhu, right? Him and his tribe see you from where you do not see them, right? Yarahu huwa wa qabiluhu min haythu la tarawnahum, right? So he has his own people, his own armies, his own those with him. So so sometimes when people say, this was a thought put into me or whispering from Shaitan or this sort of thing, it doesn't have to be the Shaitan, right? Shayateen al-Jinni wal-Ins, right? There's many of them, but in the end it's going to be attributed to Shaitan himself, right? So it's just that it's just the way people talk. It's not because he's omnipresent or anything. What is repetitive negative thoughts? I'm not sure what kind of thoughts you mean, and to be honest, that seems more like a psychology question, rather than something that I could help with. But one good thing is to just try as best you can to live more in the moment. Right, try to remove, you force yourself to think not force yourself, but rip your thoughts away from certain trains of thought that they keep going down. And if you keep doing that, okay, then your thoughts will stabilize in where you want them. Okay, one of the things that spiritually somebody's supposed to do is to try to control their thoughts as well. Try to control your thoughts. Don't dwell on negative thoughts. Don't let your thoughts go too far into one direction or the other, and try to be more somebody who lives in the present moment rather than dwelling on things that have happened in the past or may not happen in the future. Yeah, I mean, some people say that shaitan isn't a real entity, right? Not a real entity. It's just part of the psyche. And those kind of views might be interesting to talk about, but in terms of practically how you're going to respond, the response is the same. Okay, so whether it's shaitan is part of the psyche or a real entity, you need to focus more on what he's trying to push towards. That's why Hassan al-Malik talks about mashru' al-shaitan, the project of shaitan, or what shaitan wants to try to inspire in the human beings, right? So from the Qur'an, it's al-adawa wal-baghdha, animosity. So to make enemies between people. Baghdha, hatred, try and inspire hatred. Su, which is basically evil, but the word really su comes from like ugliness. Think acts, when you see them, you think that's an ugly act. Evil act is an ugly kind of act. Su fahsha, which are the indecencies, right? So things which are not decent. وَأَنْ تَقُولُ عَلَى اللَّهِ مَا لَا تَعْلَمُونَ, and to say about God that's what you do not know. Okay, and there are some other things as well. يَعْدُكُمُ الْفَقْرِ, he tries to promise you poverty, right? And some other things, but those 5 things, right? So focus on those, right? Whether shaitan is a real entity or something in your psyche, what you're battling against is what shaitan is trying to push humanity towards. That is what you're trying to push away from. Okay, and it's a good way to be able to see who is really on the path of true religion, of God's religion, and who is on the path of a deceptive, inverted religion, which has been inverted or which has been inverted by shaitan himself, right? Because it's not reasonable that you find that that a person becomes religious and he increases in his animosity, his hatred, his vulgarity, and insane about God, what they don't know. It doesn't make sense unless that he's increased in the religiosity, which is strongly influenced by shaitan. Okay. And you find that it's not reason that somebody becomes more religious, he becomes more evil. Okay, that means that the religion that he's becoming more religious in, there's a problem there. Okay, you find that a lot in the extremist Salafis and Wahhabis and those people. You find somebody who is could be like a very academically well-performing person. He was a student, okay, spending time normally like a lot of young people, right? Then he becomes Muslim and he becomes much worse than he was when he was a just a non-Muslim partying person, right? The people creating the most trouble in the world are not the people who are going to parties, right? It's the people who are going to it's people going to mosques a lot of the time, right? They're the ones who are pushing more for, some of them are the ones who are pushing more for death and destruction and hatred between people and, lack of understanding and, bigotry towards others and all of that, shaitan. Yes, Baghdha is basically hatred. Yeah, Baghdha is like hatred, Adawa is like animosity, to make enemies between people. You know. Yeah, there you go. Right, the people must go full of hate. They want to kill people. Well, it's like I said. I made another video which I really like on my channel, which I made is tale of two mosques and two prophets. Right. So we have, I've put forward that we have this two streams. Right. That the prophet, he set up the mosque of taqwa. The Quran calls it the masjid usisa ala taqwa min awwal yawmin, the masjid which was established on taqwa from the beginning. That is the mosque in which you stand, O Muhammad. Okay, but in the Prophet's time, towards the end of his life, there was another mosque that was set up, and it's called in the Quran Masjid al-Dirar, the masjid of harm, of causing harm. Right, so you have the Masjid of Taqwa and Masjid al-Dirar, right, and you have the people who of Masjid al-Taqwa, who continued, and they continued teaching their taqwa, and you had Masjid al-Dirar and those people, because they lived on after the Prophet died. After the Prophet died, the people who set up the mosque, they were still alive. The Prophet didn't kill them. Okay, he never had anybody killed, right? I just had one more question for now. How real is witchcraft, and how far does its capability go? Thanks for the answer. Really appreciate yours. Jazakallah khair. Witchcraft and sihr and these got like the black, like real black magic, actual magic. I think it is real. It's got to do with the unseen world. It's got to do with jinn. Some of it has just got to do with the power of some people's soul and aura. So let me give you an example. So one of the things which is talked about in what people call it witchcraft or sihr, right, is the evil eye, right? The idea of the evil eye. The idea of the evil eye, I think it's just a natural. It's more like a natural thing of how when you step into a room, right, you can sort of some people, if somebody steps in the room, you can sort of feel the energy that comes over them. People talk a lot like this now, right? The energy of somebody, right? People have an aura about them. You have your ruh, you have your spirit inside you, right? But an easy way to understand it is the very common experience that people always have, the idea, the feeling of being stared at, right? So you could be outside or something, and then you get this feeling like like you've got the eyes on the back of your head, like somebody's looking at you. Okay, and the funny thing, there's a lot of science backs this up now. There's an incredible. The Nobel Prize this year was given to some people who basically almost proved that they did prove that the universe is not real locally, it's got to do with quantum mechanics. So I'm not sure how much people will how many of you would be able to follow that. But there's a fantastic article. I highly recommend you just search this up on Google. The universe is not locally real, and physics Nobel Prize winners have basically proven that, right? They've proven that the universe is not locally real. It's got to do with observations and being able to actually that something is not real until you observe it. Okay, these sort of more metaphysics kind of thing, things which used to send Einstein livid. I used to say, do you really believe that the moon is not there when you're not looking at it? Right? But anyway, so when you look at somebody, okay, part of your spirit touches them. Okay, part of you, especially with your eyes, right? Because with your eyes you focus yourself almost. Where you look, your attention can be there. Right? Like somebody watching TV, somebody could be completely zoned out watching the TV. You sit next to them, you move your hands in front of their eyes, and nothing. They're just completely there. They're not next to you, right? So that's like their spirit has gone out of their body with their attention to wherever they are. So the evil eye, you can have that. You can have some people who are very malicious. Okay, they have some in their souls. They're being very malicious towards somebody, and they look at somebody with that kind of aggro and evilness, and that can be harmful. I really believe that can be harmful. Just as the opposite, it can be helpful. It can, like there are some people say, look at on us with the eye of mercy. Somebody looking at somebody else with the eye of mercy can actually benefit them, can uplift them, right? Can even cure them, right? Just like looking with the eye of an evil eye can cause somebody to fall sick. So look, there's a lot in this world which we don't understand. Is there such a thing as real magic? There is, I think, but it's very few. Far, it's not the in every street corner like people in the Muslim world think it is. A lot of that isn't. Okay, but I think it is real. Can I link the two mosques? The two mosques video. Let me see if I can link it for you. Do I have it? Where do I have it? Get onto YouTube. Find my channel here. Yeah, I mean it's just on my channel. It's got a picture. The thumbnail is the image of the name of Muhammad reversed. So it's in one way, and then it's also reversed and inverted with the color as well. Find it, here it is. A Tale of Two Mosques and Two Prophets, I called it. Do that. So yeah, this video. It's short. It's only like 10 minutes. More like it's one of those scripted video essays kind of thing. Okay, let me just see what else we have. Brother, do you think Shia Islam is more close to real Islam than Sunni? I don't know enough about Shia Islam in terms of their practices and stuff like that. You always find, here's an interesting thing. When you approach pretty much any religion, okay, from the outside, the outskirts of the religion, okay, they're very close to how they should be, right? So look at it this way: when somebody is being given da'wah, right, by these da'wah people to become Muslim, what are they told, right? They're told, believe in God, come be a Muslim, don't believe this nonsense. For example, if they're speaking to a Christian, they don't believe this, that somebody died for your sins, you're responsible for your own deeds, okay? You have to be just, okay? You should worship only God. They tell them all of this stuff, right? So on the outskirts, when you're coming in at the gates, it's all fine, right? But once somebody becomes Muslim and they get in deeper and deeper, a lot of stuff starts to be piled on, okay? So it starts to become worse and worse and worse, right? Until eventually you get to the center where they tell you all the Muslims are kuffar, right? They're all mushrikeen apart from, me and my little sect, right? Everybody else is going to hell. You have to follow this. It becomes more and more deviant in that kind of way. So in the same way, the same thing of just general Christianity, Judaism from the outside, on the surface, what is presented out when you first dip your feet into it, right? It's all fine. And a lot of, so with Shiaism, of course, I'm not deep into it. I just see the outer form of it, the things on the outside. And of course, they look just as fine as I know the things on the outside in Sunni Islam are, right? Shia have Shia is more closer to the movement of Al-Mukhtar than to the way of Ahlul Bayt. That's what it seems to me. Okay, it seems that they're more heavily influenced by the movement of Al-Mukhtar. This is like early Islamic history, than they are with Ali ibn Abi Talib and the Ahlul Bayt, right? Which is a pity because they have in the heritage of Imam Ali, if they could, of course, they've got a lot of nonsense attributed to that, but In Nahj al-Balagha, in most of that, you find incredible, Nahj al-Balagha is worth, 100 times what Bukhari, Muslim, and the Kutub al-Sitta are worth, right? And so they have in that, and also they have they don't have a love for the tyrants that's present in Sunni Islam. Okay, as far as I can see, again, I'm looking from the outside more. So, and they have the history a bit better. The history is closer. They don't whitewash the history as we do. But of course, there's a spectrum there, because in Sunni Islam you've got especially the early imams. They weren't like people now. They weren't like later Sunni, right? In some ways they were worse, in some ways they were better. For example, in history they were less whitewashed. In terms of their dogmatism, some of them were worse. So I don't think, generally I wouldn't say that. And that's not the right way to think of it, to be honest. You want to look at it and just see if you want to examine it, right? You're not going to be able to know which is closer until you've actually have a Qur'anic mindset, right? You need to once you've gained a Qur'anic mindset, and you have sort of like the Furqan as part of you, then you have a light, as the verse says, we give them, you have a Furqan, and a light which you'll be able to distinguish, you'll be able to see the difference, you'll be able to see where this is right, where this is wrong. So you need that first, before you can be able to tell which Islam is closer. You'd need that, but also you need to actually, like I said, dive deeper into Shia Islam, and not be on the outskirts of it. So I don't know as much to be able to say in general which is closer, which is not. But those sort of things, when it comes to history, they are a bit better, and some other things as well. They've got the right of it, like when it comes to zakat and sadaqah, they've got that the right way around. So for them the sadaqat are like what the Quran says, they are the tax basically, whereas zakat is the normal charity that you give regularly to sort of like purify yourself from love of wealth and these sort of things. But that's about it. That's what I'd say about that. All right, I think we'll end it there. Thank you so much for coming on. So if there's nothing else, I think we will end it there. And hopefully, inshallah, see you either next week or the week after. I'm trying to become more regular, set up sort of schedules in my work, because, like I said, things have changed a bit. So my work is a bit different, and also I'm doing more work at home of my own kids. So I need to start to sort of allocate my time better. Anyway, Jazakumullah khair. Thank you so much for coming on, and Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh.